Good afternoon. Good afternoon, and welcome to Let's Talk. I'm your host, Denise Rollard Barnes, and it's so good to be back with you again. You know, cancer remains one of the leading health challenges worldwide, affecting millions of lives every year. And Black Americans face higher cancer incidence and mortality rates compared to other groups. And raising awareness, promoting early detection, and encouraging healthy lifestyles are crucial steps in combating this disease. And that's why we bring these important discussions to Let's Talk today. As you know, this month is Cancer Awareness Month, and we are so proud to have as our guest today Taswana Sewell, who's the Vice President of the American Cancer Society for the Greater DC Baltimore area. Washington Informer reporter Stacey Brown hosted a conversation with Montell Jordan about prostate cancer, and we look forward to sharing that conversation with you later in the show. We also look forward to talking to Dr. Badur Salia, a leader in her field as the interim chair of cancer biology at the University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine and a nationally recognized scholar in translational genomics. We'll get into that a little bit more, but she'll be joining us to talk about the urgent need to spotlight ovarian cancer, a disease that is often called the silent killer. We also are going to have as one of our guests, Ms. Orr, who is a research scientist and breast cancer ovarian prevention advocate, who's going to drive home the spark that empowers women to know their family history and to seek preventive care, and challenge the silence that has cost too many their lives. You know, we don't always think about family history and family medical history. So we're so glad that we're going to have someone here to talk to us about why that's important. Desiree is someone who has stood at the doorstep of cancer 3 times, twice with breast cancer, and most recently, a metastatic breast cancer tumor that spread to her skull. What a blessing to have her with us today. But before we start our discussions with our experts, I want to remind you, which we have to do, this is our own internal commercial, to pick up a copy of this week's Washington Informer. Yes, we're still printing. Always like to say that. We're still printing. So we want you to pick up a copy of the Washington Informer at one of your local or our local newsstands throughout the DMV. And if you're not able to do that, or if you're not in the DMV, you can always get a copy and read the paper online at WashingtonInformer.com. Again, go to WashingtonInformer.com where you can get this week's issue of the Washington Informer. And as you tune in today's show, we ask you to please share this broadcast on your social media channels and follow the Washington Informer on all of your social media platforms. You know, this is also CBCF week. And for those who don't know what that means, we're talking about the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, their annual legislative weekend, which I believe is now in its 52nd year here at the Washington Convention Center. And if you have been following us online, hopefully you are getting a taste of the hundreds who are in Washington, D.C. and in forums and workshops talking about the critical issues that are impacting, we would know, definitely Black America, but as a consequence, impacting all of America. So we are bringing highlights on all of our social media channels. We hope you're checking in with us. We have the team down there that's been doing interviews and a lot of video from the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Annual Legislative Weekend at the Walter Washington Convention Center. And by the way, if you happen to register, everyone there got a copy of this special edition that we did for the CBC. But if you didn't, you can also get this online at WashingtonInformer.com. Or if you pick up a copy of the Informer, it's inserted in all of our issues. And so whether you were there or not, you can experience what's going on this week by reading this week's Washington Informer. And I have to note that normally when the Congressional Black Caucus kicks off its annual legislative weekend, they do so with a press conference that's normally held at the Walter E. Washington Convention Center. But I know many of you all were really pleasantly surprised to know that this year the press conference was held at Sycamore and Oak, right here in Washington, D.C., in Ward 8. This was a time that the CBC president said, this is a moment made, this is made for this moment. This legislative weekend was made for this moment. And this moment was a time to celebrate the strength of Black leadership, community, and collective action, which meant that if we're going to talk about community, or if they were going to talk about community, they needed to be in the community. And so thanks to the leadership of the city, the mayor, Monica Ray, who is with the business or community here in Ward 8, the leaders of the Congressional Black Caucus kicked off their annual legislative week here at Sycamore in Oak in Ward 8. And maybe at some point we'll be able to bring you some comments and some of the statements that were made there at that event. But the community was very, very proud to have them or to host them here in the community. But at any rate, let's move on with our topic, because today we're talking about cancer, but mostly cancer treatment, cancer prevention, and just all that needs to be, that you need to know about the research and support services that are being offered in the DMV. So I want to bring on our first guest, Tiswana Sewell from the American Cancer Society, to talk to us about the work that they're doing, the great work that they're doing as it relates to cancer research and support services. Tiswana, welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me and the American Cancer Society.
My pleasure. You all been around a long time, fighting this battle. I know, we do have prepared questions, but as folks know, sometimes I go a little bit off script. But can you give us just a little bit of history about the American Cancer Society, when it was established and why?
Sure. The American Cancer Society is over 100 years old, and our vision is to end cancer as we know it for everyone. Most people do know us for our research, but really we fight back against all cancers through research and discovery, but also through advocacy, making sure that there are laws in place to protect cancer patients and their families, and then as well as through direct cancer patient services. So things like free rides to and from treatment, free lodging, navigation services. We're also open 24 hours a day. And everything that we do, at the foundation of everything that we do, we focus on achieving health equity and closing disparity gaps, because we know that we won't achieve our vision to end cancer as we know it for everyone if we leave anyone behind.
So, I mean, it's 100 years, that's nothing to sneeze at. I'm sure you all have had some major achievements and breakthroughs. Talk a little bit about some of the things that you all have been responsible for or promoted as it relates to cancer treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. So our research program started in 1946. We have now invested more than $5 billion in research. And along the way, we've funded 53 Nobel laureates. And a lot of times when people hear that number of resources that we've invested, they want to know, well, what progress has been made. So as some examples, the American Cancer Society funded the doctor that developed tamoxifen, which most of us know is commonly used in breast cancer. That same doctor also discovered a less invasive way to treat breast cancer as well. We funded the scientists that discovered the BRCA genes, the person who came up with chemotherapy, the linkage between smoking tobacco and lung cancer. So we've really been a part of every major breakthrough in science since the inception of our program.
Are there any specific cancers or cancer treatments or even research projects that you all are working on right now? Because every day, as you know, we are hearing about cancers in areas that we've never even thought about of the human body, right? And so, is there any new research that you all are kind of working on right now and hoping to make a difference?
Yeah, absolutely. So we fund research across the country at NCI designated hospitals. And so each cycle, we are funding new investigators. And really, our niche is funding those who are just getting started, who have new ideas and insights into cures and treatments and medicines that they want to bring to the fore. So yes, we are consistently investing in the most cutting edge research that there is. With our own research, we have a new population study, which we can talk about now or a little bit later. But as you mentioned, disparities do exist for the African American community for almost every type of cancer. And so we have recently launched a new population study called Voices of Black Women. It's one thing to know that the disparities exist, but it is now time to figure out what are the drivers of the higher mortality rate that African American women, again, face for almost every type of cancer. With breast cancer alone, we are at a 40% greater risk of passing away from breast cancer than our white female counterparts. So those are just a couple of examples of what we're doing to stay at the forefront.
Wow. I mean, we certainly know about what's happening with Black women, and then a lot of times we don't even talk about as much cancers as it relates to breast cancer and men.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what the incidence of breast cancer is in men, whether it's Black men, whether it's higher or lower. But it seems as though we're maybe getting closer to a cure for cancer, but maybe not. What are you all predicting over there?
Well, so first of all, just to address what you said about men, men do get breast cancer as well. And so at the American Cancer Society, we do want to let folks know that the gap is rather large. For example, more than 250,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer this year. It's more like 2,500 men will be diagnosed with breast cancer. But it does still exist. And so we are looking to combat that. And what was the second part of your question?
Well, I'm just wondering, I mean, you really just answered the question. That's all. But I want to talk a little bit more. You said you're doing this study, this population study.
Yes.
And so talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'll just give a little context first. So, the American Cancer Society has been conducting population studies since the 1950s. And really, what we're looking at is taking a large swath of the population and tracking their lifestyle behaviors, their family history, and what are contributing factors to getting cancer. So, the very first study that we did was actually the study that discovered smoking tobacco leads to lung cancer. So I like to call that a duh kind of moment now. Most people do know that, but if we hadn't conducted that study, we wouldn't have known that linkage and then provide smoking cessation programs and so forth. And so, as I mentioned, we've known for a long time that African American women have this higher mortality rate. And so right now we are recruiting 100,000 African American women from around the country who have not been diagnosed with cancer between the ages of 25 and 55 to join our population study so that, again, we can discover that linkage to the higher mortality rate and then solve for that. So what are some preventative measures, treatments, and cures? And really, the survey is all online. So the first segment does take between 60 and 90 minutes. But after that, each year, it's 30 minutes twice a year. So really, it's a little bit of time, but we need women to engage in this study so that we can progress. And so just in terms of scope of all of the cancer research that's being done, not just the American Cancer Society, but in the US in general, this will still be the largest study of African American women. So often when there are studies like this, we get left behind. So
Yeah.
the American Cancer Society has decided to focus on us specifically.
This is amazing. And with regards to those who participate in this study, and we hope at least folks watching this program will go ahead and I'll get from you, how they can get access to the study and participate. But what about family? We're going to talk a little bit more about family history. So you want to hear from women who have not themselves been diagnosed with cancer and
Correct.
breast cancer specifically?
This is for all
For
cancers
all
because
cancers.
we are at higher risk for almost every cancer there is.
And so will you ask also about family history, whether there's cancer in the family?
Yeah, the questions center around your family history, also around your lived experiences, right? So I enrolled in this study. So just a quick commercial. I will say, sometimes there are stigmas in the African American community around joining a study. We're close to Baltimore, where Henrietta Lacks's information was misused. So I would say it was important for me to read the consent for myself. Did I really want my colleagues and peers to have all of Tiswana's information? So I was really pleased to know that I turn into a number, an unidentifiable number, once I enroll in the study, and that would be the same for anyone else who enrolls. But really, the study is focusing on our lived experiences. So what stressors have come into our life in terms of institutional racism, what some may call microaggressions, looking at that, again, what that family history is, what our diet and exercise is, what other health conditions we may have. And then it will be updating each year in those studies that come out, those surveys that will come out twice a year. There is also an opportunity, and this is optional, for those women who want to contribute a blood sample to do that, so that the American Cancer Society can dive a little bit deeper into genetics and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different than a clinical trial, it sounds. It's a study, so it's more of questionnaires, answering questions
Questionnaires.
online. Mm-hmm.
Correct. There won't be any health. So a clinical trial, as you know, once you have cancer, these are trials that may be on the cutting edge of a cure or preventative measures, but they still have a standard of care. This is not about providing care. These women, again, who are enrolling in the study have not been diagnosed with cancer. So it's really to track their trajectory. And if there is a diagnosis, to then discern what that linkage is.
Wow. I mean, your timing couldn't be more perfect. And regardless of whether it's a study or a clinical trial, I just say that African Americans still need to participate, because they're not, who's going to know more about our bodies but us,
Than us.
you know?
Right.
And if we don't have the research that's being done on our bodies so that we can come up with cures that are best for us, we suffer the circumstances, the results of that. So I think this is great. I'm out of the group. I'm too young to participate in the study. I
I
should say, I
understand.
have to make myself laugh about that. But at any rate, I would encourage others to do that. And because particularly now, a lot of this is a very stressful period on the lives of a lot of people, and that is having an impact on the health of folks, but especially women.
Yeah, absolutely. So, thank you for just giving the study a few minutes. If people do have questions, they can certainly reach out to the American Cancer Society. They can go to the website voices.cancer.org. I'll provide you with that website. And I just really encourage people to read about the study for themselves and at least read the consent. That's what I did. Again, I work here. I trust my colleagues. I've been with the American Cancer Society for 14 years, but I was being asked to give up my personal information. So I wanted to delve a little bit deeper into what was happening. So I would encourage everyone to do that as well.
So you all also have a walk that's coming up, the Making
Yes.
Strides Against Breast Cancer Walk. Tell us a little bit about that, when it's going to happen, how we can participate,
Yes, so I hope everyone will join us to create a sea of pink at the tidal basin. We are going to be making strides against breast cancer on Saturday, October 18th, kicking off our non competitive 5K walk at 9 a.m. We have a fabulous program, which is hosted by one of our area board members, Asia, who is also a radio personality at Radio One. We have a live band. We'll be walking. You walk past the MLK Memorial, the Washington Monument is a backdrop, the Jefferson Steps. It's really picturesque. You can get your movement and steps in for the day because we know that 30 minutes of physical activity per day can reduce your risk of cancer. And since it's on a Saturday morning, I'll say most importantly, it's a lot of fun. It's family friendly. Bring folks out, enjoy some live music. We honor survivors. You know, if you're a survivor, be a part of that. And it's free. So we do ask people to register because we like to track who's coming. And of course, as everything that we do at the American Cancer Society takes funds, we love for people to fundraise. But if you're a first timer, I'd say just come out, walk with us, experience it, and you'll be hooked. You'll want to come back year after year.
And I assume that for those that come, one, they'll learn more about the study. Two, more about, sort of some of the things that folks can do to prevent, getting cancer, like sunscreens and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I guess you're promoting screenings, things that people need to do, your annual breast cancer
Yes.
screenings and what have you. Are those, that kind of information going to be made available as well?
Yes, absolutely. All of that. We know that mammograms are one of the best ways to detect breast cancer. So we'll be talking about those screening guidelines. But really, at the American Cancer Society, we encourage everyone to be their own health advocate. There are guidelines by age. So start talking to your doctor at 40 in terms of breast cancer, but really start having those mammograms at 45. But we know that women are being diagnosed at a much younger age, especially African American women. And when it comes to triple negative breast cancer, so again, really knowing your body and aggressively advocating for yourselves. We've also found, and this is just of what's reported, that 32% of African Americans have reported discrimination when going into a doctor's office, right? Whether it's condescension or dismissiveness, just not listening to the symptoms that they're presenting. So again, really following up if you need to get a second opinion. So anyway, all of that type of stuff, information will be available at the walk, and really, asking everyone to come and dress in pink. It's so that, one, we celebrate, right? But so that people will ask questions and kind of figure out what resources they can utilize to perhaps save their own life or someone else's.
I know this is like a crazy question. I probably need to go. Sherry's giving me the signal here, but
Okay.
Swana, how did pink end up being the color for breast cancer?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. My assumption is that pink is often associated with women.
Okay.
But you know what? Don't hold me to that. I'm not quite sure how pink was selected.
So we're going to ask our viewers, send us an email at news@washingtoninformer.com. And if you get the answer to that question, we might even feature you on Let's Talk, because, that's another form of research about breast cancer and cancer generally. But I want to thank you, Swana Sewell, Vice President of the American Cancer Society for the Greater DC Baltimore area, for being with us today. And last, I always say this last, and I'm like the Baptist preacher, I'm like finally, and then I ask one more question. But do you all is there a theme that you all are, every year there's a campaign and people come up with themes. Is there a theme you all have for this year?
That's another good question. We do have a theme, and this is not the theme, but I'm going to go ahead and say get screened, because that is our theme every year.
All
for
right.
People to get screened for all cancers.
Well, that's not only a theme, but that is an action demand or request. Get screened. I think that's a great one. I want to thank you for being with us today, and hopefully I'll see you on the 18th.
Yes, please come out and walk with us. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
So, there's so much more that we could have talked to her about. But, you can always, and we put the information out there, you can always reach out to her and, or at least to the American Cancer Society and, just get more information. We hope that you will do that. Following this conversation, you're going to see the video with Stacey Brown and Montell Jordan. We hope you enjoy that. And now I'm going to move forward to also talk now to Dr. Budur Salia. We're back to talk to Dr. Budur Salia, interim chair of the cancer biology at USC, University of Southern California's Keck School of Medicine. And she's a nationally recognized scholar in translational genomics. We got to figure out what that is, but I'm so happy to bring on Dr. Salia.
Hi, Denise. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, thank you. Thank you for being with us because, we try to do this deep dive into, cancer and how it's impacting our community. So we're glad that you could take some time as one who's at the forefront of innovative research. But tell us, what is translational genomics? I want to know what that is first.
All right, I'll backtrack a little bit. So let's start with translational research. Translational research means bench to bedside. So it's when scientists take discoveries in the lab and they translate them to meaningful tools and treatments for patients at the bedside. And genomics is a subset of that sort of type of overarching research, which is specifically intended to mean bench to bedside research that uses genomics as the underlying discovery method. And what genomics is the study of all the genes in our body. So when you think about genetics, which is usually the study of genes and their hereditary nature, with the advent of technology, the term genomics came to be because technology now allows us to study all the genes at once with fancy and very sophisticated state-of-the-art technology called next generation sequencing. So if you think about the days of the Human Genome Project, when it took 10, 13 years, cost over $1 billion, took an army of people to sequence the entire human genome. That's basically when the field was born, was with that mission. But now the machines are so good, that's why they're called next generation. You can study all the genes in a very, very short time. You can sequence them all, and many genomes, so many people's genomes at the same time with these next generation sequencing technology for a small fraction of the cost of that, just a tiny fraction of the cost, and much faster turnaround. So that's where the term sort of comes from.
Interesting. And it's good that, we have people that look like you who are in that space.
Thank
and
you.
focusing on that research. So you are also focused on ovarian cancer. So tell us, why that was one of the cancers that you decided to pursue. And in addition, from what I understand, I've been told ovarian cancer is one of those cancers that's hard to diagnose. So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure, yeah. I chose to focus on ovarian cancer because it presents the most urgent need for innovation, as it's the deadliest type of cancer, gynecological cancer for women. And despite this fact, ovarian cancer has been underfunded and underdiscussed. And the gap in reliable diagnostics has left women and their doctors navigating a lot of uncertainty for far too long. So my focus on ovarian cancer came with wanting to do better around early detection. And it's a silent killer because ovarian cancer is often diagnosed at very advanced stages when it's already too late. Survival outcomes plummet significantly, as they do for any cancer that's diagnosed late at advanced stages. So when cancer is diagnosed at early stages, survival can exceed 90%, and that's true for ovarian cancer as well, and breast cancer and other cancers. But when it's diagnosed at advanced stages, the diagnosis falls below 30%, and some statistics show you below 20%. So it's vital. But the problem of solving the ovarian cancer early detection has been an ongoing issue for many, many years in the field. It hasn't been solved. And there are a lot of reasons why that is the case. We probably don't have time for that on this segment to go through it all. But in addition to not having a screening test that is effective for women who do have ovarian cancer, there's another unique problem for women who have ovarian cancer. And it's for women who already have a tumor on their ovaries. So they're already diagnosed with a tumor. So if you think about it, let me just put it in the context of breast cancer. So breast cancer, you can go and you can get screening for breast cancer every single year, whether you know you have a mass or a lump in your breast or not. And so it's a screening test, and you go to your mammogram, and they'll tell you if you have a mass or not. And if you have a mass, they often have a good idea of how to figure out if it's cancerous. It's not perfect, but it's certainly better than ovarian cancer, because one of the things that they can do for breast cancer is that they can biopsy that mass to figure out before they do anything if that mass is cancerous or not. And so that's when they put a needle through the breast tissue and take a little piece of tissue out and look under the microscope and determine whether it's cancerous or benign. So in ovarian cancer, when a woman gets diagnosed with a mass, and it's often actually because of an incidental finding, so she's going in for something else, she's getting some kind of imaging, and a tumor shows up around her ovaries. And those are referred to as adnexal masses. And the problem is that they can't often tell, the doctors can't often diagnose that mass ahead of any treatment decision of whether it's malignant or benign. And that's because biopsying those ovarian masses is very unsafe, because when you put a needle through and try to biopsy, you can rupture that tumor. And even if you don't rupture it, you can still spread cells around in the pelvic area that can actually lead to the cancer spreading just from the biopsy procedure. So it becomes very dangerous. It becomes very dangerous. So there's two problems. There's no screening test, but there's also no good way to figure out if a woman has cancer or not, if she actually already has a mass. And so you're going, and this isn't the case for women who have breast cancer. As I said, you can go for your annual screening, figure out if you have a mass. If you have a mass, you can figure out if it's cancerous or not before you treat. And you can imagine that that's a very important piece of information to have before any treatment is initiated.
Right. Is it so? Does ovarian? You said normally if they detect a mass, it's because of some other screening or something. Does ovarian cancer necessarily have any physical? I mean, some things that would make you aware that there's something awry. Yeah.
Yeah. So
the things you would be looking out for.
Yeah. So some women do have symptoms even for this. Like they get diagnosed with with a mass because the doctors might start looking. She may be going, through a physical. She may be feeling a lot of unusual pain. And so if the doctor digs enough and they do imaging, then they might find it. So it's not only through incidental findings, but that is one way of finding it. But it's molecular and, epidemiological studies basically show that women can have symptoms of ovarian cancer at least 2 years ahead of their diagnosis. But the symptoms are so vague. It could be GI-related symptoms. It could be generic symptoms like I feel bloated. How many of us feel bloated sometimes, right? It could be constipation, it could be diarrhea, it could be all of these vague symptoms that could be anything. They're non-specific. So it makes it very difficult to diagnose women. And also because the incidence of ovarian cancer is low. There are about 20,000 women who get diagnosed with ovarian cancer every year in the United States. It isn't that frequent, so those symptoms become harder and harder to pin down because you're not looking for the needle in the haystack, but it's a lot of women that you would have to screen to identify those who would have ovarian cancer. Of all the masses that get diagnosed, so if a woman has a tumor on her ovary, only 80% of those masses, once they get to surgery, are benign. I mean, 20% are cancer, so 80%, the vast majority of them are actually benign masses.
Right. Okay. All right. That's what I thought I understood you to say. So the work that you do, because we're kind of have ended our segment here, but what is you would want women to do, to know, and what impact are you trying to have in the ovarian cancer landscape? I mean, what is it, in the final sort of statement?
Yeah, the research that we've been doing is basically focused on developing diagnostic tools that can help us better determine if a woman's ovarian mass is malignant or benign ahead of surgery. And
Okay.
that becomes critical for determining what type of surgery she should have, if she should even have surgery, and who should perform that surgery. So those are three things that are critical to optimizing care for women who have ovarian cancer. Because the worst thing that could happen is that a woman has a benign mass and ends up going for very invasive surgery where she's losing her ovaries, her fallopian tubes, and oftentimes her uterus when she doesn't need any of that. But the other thing that's very dangerous is if she does have cancer, if she doesn't have the appropriate type of cancer by specialized surgeons, and then that could lead to also very bad outcomes for those women because then the tumor can spread and it worsens her outcome. So it's important to differentiate between, if I can leave the viewers with just any relevant topics or information here, is that it's important to differentiate between ovarian cancer screening and ovarian cancer diagnostics for women who already have masses, and just how critical it is to have the right tools to help the doctors. But also, please don't ignore your symptoms. Like, do not, especially if they're ongoing. If that bloating isn't going away, if that abdominal pain isn't going away, insist that you want more information and have your doctors dig and dig and dig and dig until they can rule things out or rule things in. So don't underestimate these prolonged symptoms that you might have that you feel are nothing because it's just bloating, when it could actually be something like ovarian cancer.
That's helpful, because that was you answered it, but that was one of the questions I was going to ask, as because sometimes we're our own advocates, right? We have to go in and have some information and know what to ask doctors and what to demand from doctors. And so, I mean, if there's one thing you would say to women, that they need to feel comfortable in asking their physician, whether it's their gynecologist or if they end up with an oncologist. I'm not sure what doctors end up in the space, but what should they be equipped to ask if they are experiencing symptoms and want answers?
Yes, exactly. So gynecologists are generally where you might see, or maybe your family practitioner as well. If a mass is discovered, it's going to be up to the gynecologist, most likely, identifying that mass, whether they should refer you to a gynecologic oncologist, which is the surgeon who is trained to safely remove ovarian cancer. And most gynecologists, they will err on the side of caution if they're not sure. Sometimes it's clear that it's cancer because it's already spread, and sometimes it's clear that it's benign. And so, I would say for about 50% of the time, the doctors, like a gynecologist, can figure out and maybe safely remove a benign tumor. But mistakes happen because, at the end of the day, the tests that we have are not good. And any test that we have, especially like blood-based markers, like this one called CA-125, is even less good for African Americans and women who are of Hispanic origin. So they're already bad, and they're even worse if you are, not white.
Right.
So the tools are not good. So it's just, the gynecologist has a really tough decision to make sometimes, to decide, because being wrong is really is extremely consequential. So, but don't be shy to talk to your doctors. You know your body. If you know something's not right, just keep at it. And I mean, I have my own personal story where I know that's absolutely the case. So, so just you be your best advocate for yourself.
Dr. Salih, I'm glad that you were able to join us today. I know you're in a teaching environment, so there are students coming in and out. So that's a good thing, because they're there.
Yes.
Trying to help to become the doctors that our communities need. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for sharing this information. There's a lot we learned today about ovarian cancer, and the work that you're doing hopefully will lead to better wellness paths. So I want to thank you for being with us.
Thanks again, Denise. Thank you for having me.
All right, have a great day.
You too.
Okay. So last but not least, I'm very, very excited to bring on Coletta Orr, who is a research scientist and breast and ovarian cancer prevention advocate, who's going to talk to us not only about some of her own experiences, but some of the early warning signs. We talked about that with regards to ovarian cancer, but we certainly do want to talk about some of the other steps that women can take to protect themselves. Is Dr. Orr there? Research scientist, or I'm making you a doctor already. I know you're on the path to get that PhD.
Yes, yes.
Welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you've heard a lot, like I have, and maybe you can help to translate some of this from, especially what we just heard from Dr. Salia. But as a advocate for breast cancer and ovarian cancer prevention, you're that woman in that space who needs to know how to read their bodies and also how to talk to their doctors. What can you tell us about what you've heard and how you would have answered a couple of those questions?
Language is everything in regards to cancer prevention and awareness. So I think it's important to be able to translate scientific language or clinical language to the community so they know how to have those conversations with their primary care physicians or gynecologists. So language is everything.
Well, that I know sometimes people don't have the words, right? We don't know. We may have discomfort in places, or we may have been even diagnosed with, like you say, breast cancer. Or let's say, for example, if you go to the doctor and they think they've seen something and they want you to come back and all of a sudden you think you have cancer, right?
Mhm.
And so you don't know kind of what to ask to empower yourself to feel more confident in the treatment that you may be getting or the responses from your doctors. I mean, language, maybe you can come up with some language that women, and you've experienced this yourself, correct?
When I spoke with you earlier, my family, my grandmother had ovarian cancer, her mother had breast cancer. I have never had any forms of cancer before.
Oh, well, you'll
But
be in that study.
right, I actually studied, and then I wrote a book called "Cancer Doesn't Always Win," and that's where I translate scientific and clinical terms into layman terms for the community can understand, something they can grab hold, pick up, and just read it verbatim and not be confused or overwhelmed by the language.
And so let's talk about some of this language that you think confuses people. I mean, again, we just talked about that scenario. You go in and, the doctor says, we want you to come back because we think we saw something.
Mhm.
Um, and that might be the simple thing. We think we saw something.
Right. The language that I was speaking of is the steps you need to do. When they tell you you need to go see a gynecologist, if indeed they saw cancer, or maybe they haven't saw cancer, but it needs to be determined, they most likely need to see an oncologist gynecologist, someone that specialized that in women organs that specialize in cancer. Because you can be a gynecologist, but you aren't skillful enough to be able to find all those nuances in regards to cancer. So that's why they understand the language. They need to understand the terms of what they need to do in order to protect themselves.
So, Coletta, how did you end up on this path of, even recognizing that language was, an important factor? We know it is, but, I mean, to specialize in something like this and to write a book about it, where did that passion come from?
That passion came from my maternal grandmother. She passed away from ovarian cancer when I was starting college at 18. And we never heard of ovarian cancer. We've heard of breast cancer, but we've never, like, what is this disease? So once she passed away from that disease, I was on a mission to figure out what it was. I had no desire to major in biochemistry and go this route. until this happened to her. And I just know if my grandmother would have had a resource or something to explain to her in layman terms what to look for, she might have would have, I can't say she wouldn't have been diagnosed, but she definitely could have lived longer. She had those symptoms a long time before she actually took action, went to a doctor, and was diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer. She had all the symptoms. Started bleeding. I mean, my grandmother was 67 when she passed away. You should not be bleeding once she went through menopause. She started bleeding again, and she thought that she was getting her cycle. That was normal. She didn't know.
And I've heard that from women. Yeah.
So when you don't have that information, you just go with the flow, go along with it, and by the time you grab a hold to it, it was out of control. So that's my passion, to give the community something that they can read and understand that makes sense.
What are some of the other terms that you break down to layman's terms? For example, you just mentioned stage 4, and we hear stages. We tend to know that the higher stages means that it's more critical, that death may be imminent, although it's not always. But, we hear about these stages. What are some of the other terms that you have had to break down or felt the need to break down for people?
I use this language so much, I have to actually stop and think, because it's so normal for me. Like when you say stage 4, that's just like, to me, it's like normal. And I would almost think, like you say, everybody would think stage 4 more advanced. Right. What language? Just looking for the signs and symptoms. Just looking for signs and symptoms. Just language about genetic testing. The steps they need to do, conversations they need to have with their doctor in regards of letting them know your family history. That's the first step with genetic testing. A lot of times they hear genetic testing like, what is that? What's the dynamics around that? That's letting your primary care physician know your family history. They need to know your mother's background and your father's side of the family background. When they know this background and they can determine that you have a certain amount of cancer on both sides, they can recommend you go for genetic testing. So once you go for genetic testing, then they can determine like, okay, yes, you have mutations like BRCA1, BRCA2. But I like people to know that it's so many other genes, that mutated genes are associated with breast and ovarian cancer besides this BRCA. They are the popular ones, but it's hundreds that's associated. But once you have genetic testing done and perhaps you have some mutations, your doctor can manage your health differently because you have mutations that mean you're already at high risk. So whereas someone gets a mammogram once a year, now that they found these mutations, you may get a mammogram twice a year or 3 times a year, or maybe not a mammogram, maybe an ultrasound. They will manage your health differently once you have had genetic testing, because that's just giving them all the information they need. And that's important.
You, in your book, I'm curious, I'm going to put that back up again because we want people to take a look at that. And then you have, you can access it, I guess. How else? I see the.
You can access it at my website, Amazon. It's on Barnes and Nobles as well.
Okay.
Yes, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and my website. Yes.
Now, you're talking about, you said, breast cancer, and how sometimes you want to get your annual breast cancer exam, your annual colorectal exam, these other exams, but a lot of times we don't do that until the doctor calls. right? So should we be marking our calendars? How do we schedule our own health screenings so that we're kind of ahead of the game? Do you you're not a doctor, but I'm going to say, do you prescribe that or what?
Usually once you start doing that, you will get an alert from your doctor. Once you start once, you get a reminder from your doctor, hey, it's time for your yearly mammogram, or it's time for your yearly pap smear. You usually get those updates if you go at least once. They will remind you every year to get these exams. And I would like to mention, like during the pandemic, we was really in a good place when it came to awareness, because people are aware of breast cancer. You know what I'm saying? They are aware, not as so much so with ovarian cancer, but during the pandemic, we were in a good place with, a high number of people getting their mammograms. Pandemic hit, it stopped. People wasn't going out, they wasn't getting their mammograms. And when we ran the numbers the next year, it was like, oh, okay, we have a lower incident rate of cancer. Well, this is great. Okay, because people wasn't getting mammograms. So
Right, right.
the following year, they ran the numbers. People were getting diagnosed, and they were diagnosed at a more advanced stage because they missed that whole year of being diagnosed, being in treatment, and things of that nature. So it's important to keep up with your yearly screenings. So important.
And I think it's a great tribute to your grandmother, to follow this path, to do the work that you're doing. But I want to talk a little bit about why you think family history is so important. That people talk, mothers talk to their daughters, fathers talk to their sons, hopefully, if, or grandparents talk about why family history is important.
Family history is important. Like I piggyback on saying with genetic testing, you need to know your mother's side and your father's side. Your father's genetic makeup is just as prevalent as your mother's side, and it does increase your risk of developing many diseases. It could be heart disease, not only breast and ovarian cancer. You need to notate all those things, even if they had stroke, hypertension. All those things tie into family history and your medical record and what could happen to you. Because when you're 40, they're going to manage your health a certain way. Once you turn 50, they manage it a certain way. In these different, in 60 and 65 and so forth. So when you have a family history with any of these diseases, they know, like, okay, once you turn 55 or 60, we're going to monitor this closely because this is when this is more prevalent to happen. So that's why it's so important to know your family history. So your doctor can follow along your medical journey.
And we need to close because we're running out of time, but is there any advice you would give folks on how they maintain their medical records? You talk about family history. Something may have happened to you 20 years ago. You've forgotten all about it until you go to a new doctor and they say, when was that surgery? When was that, but is there a way you think to kind of collect or maintain family medical records? Your own medical records, not family, but medical records?
I don't know like a specific process. I know for me, I just have all my stuff noted. I have it noted. I have it like in my phone. I know, because you gotta understand, if it's your mother, your father, your grandparents, that stuff is never gonna change. And if
Right.
you had surgery, like, I don't know, appendix, tonsillectomy, they want to know everything, when you go to the doctor. I think those things you would remember, your surgeries, I think you would remember. But once you lay out your family history and you have it laid out, that information will always be there. When I go to my primary care physician, I go in, he pops open the laptop, type in my medical number, all my information pops up from since I've been going. So all my family history is there. It never leaves. If I need to add something, like, okay, a mother got diagnosed with something new, I might add that information. But if you stick with your primary care, or even if you have to change primary care physicians, your record should go with you.
Right.
To keep that. So we have to be more proactive with managing our health, because we can't expect and assume that the doctor is going to check off every list. That's our responsibility to be able to share that information with them to be proactive with our own health.
So in closing, I mean, you have selected to become, a researcher, and, you're focusing on breast and ovarian cancer. What would you like people to know is your mission? In the end, what would you want people to say about Coletta Orr 10 years from now or whenever? I mean, besides, she wrote a great book. She was a great advocate.
Yeah.
What is there something that sort of drives you?
I think what drives me is that I've been at the bench doing research for a lot of years. And what drives me that I can actually go into the community and have those conversations with things that they don't understand. It's a whole nother world being at the bench versus being engaged with the community. I just got back from Los Angeles, California. I had to do a talk out there for ovarian cancer awareness like 2 weeks ago. And the feeling you get when you can engage and you see how you're making a difference with people. When people email you a week later and say, thank you so much. I thank you so much for that information. I just got diagnosed, or my sister just got diagnosed. Now we have a plan of action. That's what drives me. The scientific part is great. it's great because I know I have contributed to science in regards to, producing medicinal compounds, coming up with coming up with drug development. I've done that. But until I have made an impact in the community about prevention and awareness, that's where the impact lies, in the community.
All right. Well, I appreciate you being a voice here at Let's Talk, for sharing your information. We're putting it up on the screen so people can reach out, hopefully get a copy of your book and enjoy that as well, get something out of it, which I'm sure there's a lot of information there for them. And keep doing what you do. We need it.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank you for joining us today. And a special thanks again to our wonderful and knowledgeable guests. We've had a powerful and eye-opening conversations about cancer, its challenges, the importance of early detection, and the incredible resilience of women facing this disease. So now, before we go, I want to share a special conversation with our reporter, Jada Ingleton, one that she is having with Desiree Waters, a remarkable woman who has stood the doorstep of cancer not once, but 3 times, twice with breast cancer, and most recently with a metastatic tumor that spread to her skull. So Desiree's story is one of courage and faith and unwavering hope in the face of overwhelming odds. It's been a long program, but I think it's worthwhile that we have these discussions, and we hope you're getting something out of it. So we want, again, for you to keep watching, and let's take a moment now to watch the interview. And I'll see you back here next week on Let's Talk, when we talk about all aspects of financial literacy. Until then, enjoy the next conversation, and I will see you next week.
Ms. Denise, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Jada Ingleton, Washington former content editor, and I'm very pleased to be joining this important conversation and bringing on our next guest, who will be sharing her own story and insights of amplifying the importance of not only this month's Cancer Awareness Month, but October's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So I would love for you all to join me in introducing Desiree Waters. Hi, Desiree. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
By all means, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story?
My name is Desiree Waters. I am a 3-time cancer patient. I am currently in my 3rd bout with cancer. I'm just a year in, and I am a first-time collaborative author.
Awesome, and I can't wait to talk about your book, amongst just kind of what led you to want to share your story. So actually, why don't you kick us off? Tell us about the book, When Cancer Knocks at Your Door. How were you able to kind of use this writing experience as a benefit to you that you hope it will benefit readers in the same way?
Benefit to me. I think that's a loaded question. Benefit to me, when the way it actually came about is a friend of mine by the name of LaDonna Stanley Thompson had the vision to put together several individuals who were battling cancer or had survived cancer. And she approached me and asked me, would I take part? And I kindly told her, no, I am not a writer. And that wasn't something I was looking to do. After some consideration and some more conversation, I decided to say, I'll do it. The honorary of it all is, once I agreed to be a part, I was diagnosed with my 3rd bout and became very ill. So I had to resend my offer. In LaDonna's true fashion of who she is, she said to me, I have to wait for you. And she waited until I was able to write. I never joined any of the meetings or the calls. I never participated to anything. I just wrote as I had strength to write, and here I am.
I mean, the power of community and having people that support you throughout your journey is definitely something we're going to touch on. And, when we talk about specifically, having cancer, being diagnosed with cancer 3 different times, what was that like for you? If you can share a little bit about, some of the challenges that you face, both mentally and physically throughout your journey.
Many challenges for me. The first time, my first bout was in 2017. And, that, although very daunting, I was in a place in my life, in my walk, because I'm a believer, and I felt like I could conquer it. Although the initial diagnosis definitely shook my foundation my husband and I. But the second time was very challenging. I kind of lost myself. I felt as if I couldn't believe I was breast cancer, same breast. I had just finished going through my 5th year. And if you know anything about cancer, they really measure your being cancer free after you've reached the 5-year mark. I was maybe 1 or 2 months into my 5-year mark, and I was diagnosed again. And so that took me. I had some very dark days, and it was only the prayers of the people who loved me and surrounded me that really brought me out, because I really couldn't pray for myself. And then here I am, the 3rd bout, and I am battling cancer in my skull and behind my right eye. I have a tumor that is cancerous that cannot be removed, else I would be blind.
To hear that, and I appreciate you sharing that with us.
No problem. I want to share because this is my way of helping people, letting people know that a diagnosis doesn't have to be the end of your journey. In fact, it can be the beginning of a new one. But in the moment, you may not recognize that, simply because when you hear the word cancer, immediately you think a death sentence, and it doesn't have to be that. It can be just tightening your grip, putting one foot in front of each other, and working with your doctor.
And, I'm curious to know, you say that, of course, there were dark days and you were at at one point that you couldn't turn to prayer. So might be another loaded question. I want to know what were some things that were helpful during those dark days that have carried on, even how you're navigating this current cancer, and what allowed you to kind of turn back to God or be able to find comfort, I want to say.
Well, to be honest, it's simply one word. It was the prayers of everybody who was praying for me. I did nothing. I literally did nothing. I felt like, not that there wasn't any hope to survive the cancer. It was that I was tired mentally. I was tired physically. And that is what took me to a dark place. And in between the first diagnosis and the second, I got hit in the head with a car tire. And I was down for almost a year and a half with headaches and sleeping sitting up. So I had several things that had happened back to back that also helped to take me to that dark place. It wasn't just the 2 diagnoses. Yeah, it's been a rough road, but yet I survived. Thank God. I'm still walking.
And walking with a smile on your face at that.
Yeah, sometimes you don't look like what you're going through or what you've been through. It's not a look, it's an internal thing. And if somebody really don't know your life, they can look at you and assume one thing, but it can be.
And I love that point because leading me to my next question, this last had their March On festival. And there was healthcare and wellness officials and students alike doing different webinars and talking about basically the power of storytelling, of sharing these stories with other people. So of course you've mentioned what makes you want to tell your story, but what are some ways that storytelling has been transformative to you in your own?
Not so much telling my story has been transformative to me. What's been transformative to me is the people who are receiving my story, who are blessed by my story, who have said to me, oh my gosh, you have to write another book because you didn't finish your story. Because in this book, when it went to press, I was just in the middle stages of my 3rd bout. So they don't know where I am now. So that's really what it was. Totally. It's the people. It's the people who want to hear from me. It's the people who are saying to me, you helped me. I had so many testimonials from people I didn't even know that was so blessed by it. That's what carried, nothing of me, honestly.
And in terms of, maybe even in the early stages of your first diagnosis, was there ever anything that was like, that resonated with you that you heard from someone else that was a patient, or even just in the sense of, learning something new because of a story you heard from, if that makes sense?
Yes, totally. No, I had not been around or associated with a lot of people who had cancer. Truly, I'm an investigator at heart. So when I was diagnosed, I did my own research. One of the things that helped me the best was a book that I read. It's The Only Answer to Cancer by Dr. Colwell. I was looking over at it, sorry, to get his name. That helped me in my journey. But I just looked at everything and weighed it spiritually in me, because see, this walk is not the same for everybody. Now, I can tell my story, but your story is going to be your story. Their story is going to be their story. Now, you can take away maybe my strength or my faith, how I walked in my faith, or how you thought I was resilient. But your walk is going to be your walk, and you're going to have to manage that for yourself, because they're all. If that answered your question, did it?
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
okay.
it did. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
So my next question, and winding down to the last couple of ones,
Okay.
you know, talking about cancer or any medical or health condition, you also have to kind of address the fact that there are, particularly among Black women, even in cases. So what advice do you have for our audience and Black women around the world, really, about knowing when and how to advocate yourself in healthcare?
First off is get yourself checked out. That's number one. And if you come across someone that doesn't align with your spirit or is just off to you, find another. A lot of times we think we have to settle for the person that is trying to treat us or doing something for us. Find something. There's all kinds of free things. Howard University does free things. There's all kind of resources out there. You just have to go and search for them. Don't settle. Be your own advocate, because no one's going to fight for you like you're going to fight for you, right? Unless you can't fight for yourself, and then, a loved one will come in and, be the advocate for you. But if you're in a place where you can talk and you're in your right mind and you can just keep digging. The website is, social media, and, how you can research things now is totally different. So you can do that from the privacy of your home. YouTube videos, just research. You'll come across something. I guarantee it.
Desiree. And, I know you mentioned, of course, having your communal support system around you. Is there any organizations or resources in specific that have also been helpful to you that you'd like to share with someone else?
Not really any organizations. My support system consisted of mainly two individuals. First off, my husband saw me through what everybody else could know nothing about in my darkest days. And then my husband, Stanley. And then there was my bonus mother, Diane, who no matter what, when, how, if I needed anything, or even when I thought I didn't need anything, she was there. So I had two strong people around me to help me. Now, there were others, but those were the two main people that helped carry me through. And then the other was just my ability to read and find for myself. I didn't really join support groups. I didn't really do any of that. I just did my own thing. And any cancer patient will find out you're going to do what's best for you. Maybe support groups would work for someone else. I think they're very great things for some people. For me, that wasn't the answer. To me, it was investigating, myself and learning myself.
And for my last question, a two-part question.
Okay.
I want to know, what do you hope that viewers of today's conversation will take away? But also, what do you hope that readers take away from the conversation?
Well, if you are a cancer patient, I hope that this book serves you as a companion through your most darkest days, and that you will see the light at the end of the tunnel. If you are a caregiver or someone who's just supporting someone who has cancer, I hope this book serves as a resource to teach you how you may show up for someone battling cancer. And certainly is always at the end of it for me.
I love that response, Desiree. I wish we had more time. I have more questions. So you and I would definitely be connecting again. But
I hope so.
on behalf of today's conversation, thank you so much for not just your insight, but your transparency and vulnerability, telling your story, both in print and for our audience.
Thank you for having me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I can't wait to talk to you again.
Absolutely. And I have your email.
That's right. Hit me up.
I will. Thank you, Desiree, and have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you, and you do the same.
What an insightful conversation. All of the conversations that we've had today can reach somebody and not only make a difference in their day, but make a difference in their life or the life of someone they know. So if anything, I hope you took away some powerful lessons, some inspiring testimonies, and most importantly, continue these conversations in your own neighborhoods, within your own systems, because it's not just important for the next 2 months, but it's important in general and every day. So thank you so much for joining us today. Everyone have a great day, and thanks for joining the Washington Informer.